Hey team, welcome back. Chris here once again with the DABA Africa. Bit of a rundown on South Africa as we start April 15th of 2020. Bit of a mixed bag for South Africa, and I'll talk about that as we update folks on financial issues taking place in the wake of the Wuhan coronavirus, or COVID-19 by its scientific name. Now, you may notice a trend here the last day or so that I've done a few South Africa specific videos, but that's in large measure the fact, number one, I have a great affinity for South Africa. For those who know that, you know me well. And the other reason is that I picked up a number of subscribers from South Africa of late, and so as a thank you to them, I wanted to give them a little bit of, from outside the wire, a little bit of coverage from a voice that's not South African on South Africa. Take that for what it's worth. But I didn't just fall off the back of the turnip truck. I've been doing this for a while, covering South Africa, that is. So at this hour, as we approach almost midnight here on the 14th, it's already the 15th in South Africa, the world is reporting 1,980,003 confirmed cases of the coronavirus, with 126,557 fatalities attributed to it. Here in the United States, we passed the 600,000 threshold with 608,458 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Sadly, 25,992 fatalities attributed to it. But I do caution folks once again that there seems to be a habit for local health authorities attributing any positive test as the cause of death, when oftentimes people are dying from other things. They happen to be infected with the virus, but that's not what's killing them. That's not the proximate cause of death. Now, why might they do that? Well, one perverse reason could be because the more deaths you report, the more likely it is you'll get assistance from the federal government and from state authorities. So, whatever the case is, that's 26,000 humans who've lost their lives in recent days. So that's not encouraging. Whatever the case is, whatever the deaths are attributed to. In Pennsylvania, 25,345 confirmed cases, with 584 fatalities. Here where I live in York County, Pennsylvania, in the center of the state, 371 confirmed cases with just 3 fatalities thus far. Switching to South Africa, 2,415 cases and 27 fatalities. That's still a relatively low number, but South Africa leads the continent, just slightly ahead of Egypt and Algeria for having the most confirmed cases around the continent. I read earlier today that South Africa has tested somewhere in the order of 87,000 individuals for the COVID-19 virus. That's a shockingly low number, and I'm curious as to why authorities are not testing more people in South Africa. Is it a question of not having the test kits, not having the capacity, or is money a factor? Whatever the case is, certainly one would hope that the number of people being tested would climb in South Africa so that the authorities could get a better feel for what's going on. Well, on the 14th of April, 2020, just yesterday, as South Africans wake up at this hour, they'll be learning of this news if they are not already aware of it. The Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago, from South Africa, predicted that the country's gross domestic product would shrink by 6% in 2020. That's a shocking figure. That's a catastrophic figure, 6%. That is a revision upwards from previously 2.3, I believe it was, and then 4.2, and now they're saying 6% from the Reserve Bank governor. The Reserve Bank itself projects that 370,000 jobs will be lost during the course of 2020 as a result of this crisis. 370,000 jobs. The situation from private banking analysts is even more grim. Private banking analysts are projecting GDP will contract by 7% in 2020. For an economy that was already in recession and due to contract whether there had been a COVID virus or not, this is especially bad news. The banking analysts also project that the South African government's budget deficit, which was projected in the budget at 6.8% of gross domestic product for 2020, will now approach 12%. It's a shockingly high figure. In response, South Africa's Reserve Bank has cut the lending rate by a full 100 basis points today. It's the second cut in less than a month, and that lowers the rate to 4.25, a virtually unheard of low interest rate in Africa. Shockingly low. That'll reduce yields for investors, but it will likely make more credit available for those who need to borrow money and are able to borrow money. Second rate cut in less than a month. Other good news, the central bank has announced that it will not print money to pay for the government's deficits. And the reason that they gave is that it's not necessary, it's inflationary, and it's contrary to the Reserve Bank's mandate. Well, folks, I would have to applaud the Reserve Bank and its governor, Liceto Canyago, for their independence. This is especially difficult in a time like this for a ostensibly independent body like the South African Reserve Bank to retain its independence under pressure from governments. Here we see in the United States what I would argue is collusion between our central bank, the Federal Reserve, and the government. Ostensibly, we have an independent Federal Reserve, but we've seen 3 decades now of close coordination, and I would argue in many cases collusion on the part of presidents of the United States and the Reserve Bank and the Reserve Bank governors to keep interest rates artificially low. For most of the last 30 years, credit has been far too easy to come by, especially for uncreditworthy individuals. But in the wake of a crisis like this, we all perhaps look the other way and hope that it's enough to allow things to improve. Well, that's what the Reserve Bank is doing. These are prudent decisions, and South Africans should be grateful that they have a Reserve Bank that makes wise, fiscally prudent, and sound economic decisions like not printing more money. Here in the United States, the Federal Reserve has agreed to set up as much as $4 trillion in quantitative easing like printing of money to flood the money supply, which will, of course, simply lead to inflation and undermine the value of the existing dollar, all in the interest of putting cash injections into the economy. I didn't think this was wise in the previous administration, and it devalued the dollar, and is one of the reasons why, in my view, the euro did not collapse when it should have collapsed several years ago in the wake of the Greek, the Spanish, the Italian, the Irish, and the Portuguese near bankruptcies, fiscal problems. The euro likely should have collapsed, but it did not because the dollar was nearly as weak because of quantitative easing and collusion with the Federal Reserve. So your Reserve Bank of South Africa is making wise decisions, even though ours may not be here in the United States. Well, while your Reserve Bank is making wise decisions, your finance minister, Tito Mboweni, someone who is a wise and intelligent individual, has come out and said that the government will not seek International Monetary Fund assistance to help it in this crisis. Now, that's puzzling. Why would the ANC not seek assistance from the IMF when 19 countries in Africa just qualified for debt relief under a grant program, which will simply wipe away their debt, and Ghana just received $1 billion in special drawing rights from the IMF to help it out? So what is going on here? Well, why would the ANC not want this money? The excuse that the African National Congress is offering to the country and to the world is that they don't want to participate in a structural readjustment program. Quite frankly, they need to pay attention to current events. The IMF and the World Bank are easing back from the standard line of structural adjustment in this unique black swan event and potentially offering resources and assistance in the interest of saving the global economy and preventing pervasive poverty as a consequence. So structural adjustment programs may not be in order, and simply walking away from the IMF and the World Bank is a questionable decision. But why would the ANC do that? Well, I have a reason why the ANC would do that. Think about it for a moment. If the ANC participated in what it thought might be a structural readjustment program, that means that it would have to adjust its macroeconomic policies. What policies are we talking about? Well, its policy of propping up state-owned enterprises. Now today, just yesterday, the South African government finally backed off of propping up South African Airways endlessly, that money pit that it is, and denied its latest request for 10 billion rand. So they're backing away from that. But they're not going to back away from Eskom or Transnet or the host of other state-owned enterprises in South Africa. So state-owned enterprises, they don't want to get away from that. Black economic empowerment or racial discrimination programs entrenched in the system intended to lift Black South Africans out of poverty. And in fact, all it does is perpetuate misery for all South Africans with wrong-headed, equal opportunity, affirmative action programs, which are not equal opportunity, they're not affirmative, and all they have done is lead to pervasive corruption and suffering by Black South Africans and white South Africans. So they don't want BEE to go away. And if they go through structural adjustment, it is likely to be something that will be forced away. And then, of course, all the while, we're led to believe that with the departure of the Zuma government, the phenomenon of state capture and corruption has disappeared. Ladies and gentlemen, state capture and corruption have not disappeared in South Africa. It's simply not the focus of the day, and it's not on the scale that it was under Zuma. Corruption continues unabated, particularly with the BEE process and government tenders, and it is still out there. If the ANC lets the IMF or World Bank in to see behind the curtain, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, but if they see behind the curtain, they're going to see what's going on with state-owned enterprises, with BEE, and with state capture. In addition, while it seems possible the ANC may find reason and abandon its wrong-headed and race-based discriminatory position on expropriation without compensation, a wholly unnecessary effort to amend the Constitution simply because the ANC has spent 26 years not effectively implementing its own policies and procedures. It has the ability to expropriate today, but it has to compensate folks, and it has to be in the public interest. If they move forward with an IMF program or with World Bank assistance, they would have to abandon EWC. And there you have it. The ANC does not want the world to see what is happening behind the curtain. But the world is not being fooled, nor are South Africans. Some South Africans, of course, continue to blindly believe what they're being told. But the reality is that failures are what are happening here. Now, having said that, this is not an attack on the ANC. They find themselves in an impossibly difficult situation, not of their own creation, when it comes to COVID-19. However, state-owned enterprises that they inherited from the National Party and have retained and reinforced, BEE, a creation of their own, state capture, a phenomena of their own that they allowed to run rampant for over a decade, and now the beast is difficult to contain or control, and the wrong-headed approach with expropriating property without compensation are all weighing down the South African economy. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of talented white, black, colored, Asian South Africans have abandoned South Africa and moved to Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, but especially to Australia and New Zealand. And they're making success abroad. Those folks should be in South Africa, contributing to South Africa's future, not living abroad. But why have they left? Many have left because the policies of South Africa are wrong-headed. And that's the situation we find ourselves in today. So bravo to your central bank, to your reserve bank, and its policies that appear to be sound. And normally a bravo to the finance minister, Tito Mboweni, but the decision not to approach the IMF leaves South Africa in a quandary. There's nothing left in the cupboard, folks. Where are the resources going to come from to continue this situation? There are only so many billionaires that are willing to pony up money or have the money to pony up to cover for the programs that the ANC-led government doesn't have cash to pay for. So what is the next step? At some point, the ANC is going to have to find a savior, someone that's willing to grant or loan it money without looking behind the curtain. Potential candidates could be the African Development Bank, possibly, and or Beijing. And a turn towards Beijing is not in South Africans' interest. The ANC sees no difficulty with that, but that is not a path that they should go on. Ask Zambia, ask Djibouti, consequences of getting too tightly intertwined with dependency on China. So there you have it, folks. That's a little rundown for South Africans as they wake up on the 15th of April 2020 to a mixed bag of information about the financial situation in South Africa, between the Reserve Bank lowering the interest rate a full 100 basis points to 4.25% and making the decision not to print cash to cover government deficits. Very sound macroeconomic decisions which may help stabilize things to a degree. But at the same time, a cash-poor African National Congress decides not to turn to the International Monetary Fund to help it out in its moment of crisis, ostensibly to avoid structural adjustment programs. Well, the reality is, folks, they just don't want folks to see behind the tent what's going on with state-owned enterprises, black economic empowerment policies, state capture, which continues, and the expropriation without compensation. I would wish that at some point the ANC would abandon some of these policies and treat all South Africans equally and focus on delivering proper education and public safety for all South Africans. Those two things alone will go a long way towards saving South Africa. not the current wrong-headed approaches. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a production of the Indaba Africa Group. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, you like the content, I ask that you subscribe to the channel. Just push that button right down there. Subscribe. Don't forget to push the little bell to the side and select personalized for notifications. That way, anytime I produce a video, you'll get an update letting you know that there's a new video out there, or when I do a live stream. I'll have another live stream coming up soon, most likely focused on South Africa and or Southern Africa. Probably over the weekend I'll do that if I get enough people interested in it. If you are interested, just send me a note and I'll be sure to keep that in mind. So please subscribe to the channel. If you have a comment, feel free to comment on the content. I do listen to comments and adjust, and I also take requests for videos. And finally, I ask that if you like this video, please push the like button. Likes drive viewership. What I mean by that is YouTube promotes videos that get more likes. So there you have it, folks. I thank you for tuning in. This has been an Indaba Africa production. I'll see you next time, and hang in there. We're going to get through this.